Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Even If Project podcast. I'm Christina. I'm so glad you guys are here with me today. Whether you've been following with us or following along with us together on this journey through John, or this is literally your first episode, welcome. Grab your coffee, get comfortable, unless you're driving. And if you can't tell, I am sick once again. I know this is like the 45th time at this point, and I don't know, I genuinely need someone to slide immune boosting recommendations into the comments because my body is absolutely not cooperating this season, or let's be honest, last season as well. I am getting wrecked by these colds, and I have no idea what to do anymore or how to avoid them. My voice, if you can't tell, which you should, is hanging on by a thread right now, and I am just genuinely praying that I can hold it together long enough to get through this episode or that you guys can understand what I'm even saying. So if I sound a little rough, that is why. Bear with me. I'm so sorry. And actually, I don't even know why that made me think of this, but it has nothing to do with it. But my neighbor texted me last night, actually. I just have to share this with you guys. My neighbor texted me last night, and he mentions that him and some of his family have been listening to this podcast. And when I say he has been listening, he is pretty far along in the episodes. But when he told me, I literally just wanted to like disappear into the floor. I just wanted to sink into the floor and like not exist for a little bit with embarrassment. Like, I don't know how to explain this. I want people to listen. This is literally the whole point of why I'm doing this. I want people to listen to this and be able to be a point that can help you understand the Bible or grow in your faith or whatever this can help you do. Um, but the second that anyone I actually know in real life tells me that they've been tuning in or listening, I immediately become a different person. I can sit here and talk to thousands of strangers about God and feel totally fine. Mind you, I don't actually see the thousands of strangers. I just see my camera. But the moment that my neighbor says, "Yeah, we listen," I'm like, how is that even possible? How are you allowed to do that? And if you guys can hear a TV in the background or this vacuum thing we have, I left my door open because my toddler is awake right now and he's just having some independent playtime. So there might be a little bit noise in the background, but I'm just trying to get this done because I haven't been able to this week with this cold. Um, but back to this neighbor thing. I just want to be very clear though. I am genuinely touched. Honestly, I love these neighbors so much, and it means the absolute world to me that him and some of his family members are actually spending time listening to this little podcast and growing with God, and that is why I do this. That is everything. But also, I know you. You've seen me in my driveway. This is embarrassing. I don't know how to look you in the eye anymore. So if you know me personally, hello. It means so much to me that you are here and you are listening to it. But please never bring it up to my face. Just kidding. I love to know. I love that he brought it up to me. I love that he told me because it means so much. And actually, I have been debating on whether I should keep going with this. And when he told me about it, I think mainly the cold was telling me that. But when he told me that they listen to it and he loves it and enjoys it, it honestly gave me a little bit of push that like to keep going, almost like God is telling me you need to keep doing this. So I'd love to know. I will just feel with embarrassment for a while, and but I'm so glad that he told me. But anyways, now, real quick before we open our Bibles, I say this every time, and I mean it every single time. I'm not a pastor. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a Bible expert. I didn't go to a seminary. I'm just a girl with her Bible open, a cup of coffee nearby, and a heart that loves God and is just trying to figure this out right alongside you. So if I ever say something that just doesn't sit right with you or you don't think is correct, because interpretations or your interpretation can be completely different than what mine was, drop a comment, send me a message. We can discuss and learn together and just keep growing side by side. And if you're newer to faith or the Bible still feels overwhelming and confusing sometimes, because it does, you are exactly in the right place. I try to take everything slow here. I try to break everything down a little more. And I will never where I try not to use super churchy words that are hard to understand or that new believers don't really understand without stopping to kind of explain what it actually means in everyday language. So if you don't understand something, seriously, reach out to me. I mean that with my whole heart. I will be more than willing to answer any questions that I can or try to even open up for discussion for everybody else. But okay, with all that being said, Bible is open, coffee is here, voice is trying. Let's get into it today. So before we read, I just want to make sure that you can picture where we are in this part of the Bible. We are in the same room that we were in the last episode. Remember, we were in this position where Jesus was washing feet. We're at the same table, the same night, the same people. And again, if you were with us last time, we watched Jesus get down on his knees and wash his disciples' feet, which disciples' feet. I don't know why I said that. Which in that culture was the lowest, most humble job you could possibly do. And we talked about what it means that Jesus, their teacher, their Lord, was the one who did it without hesitation, without making it about himself. And here's the thing that still gets me about that moment. Judas was in the room. Jesus knew, even then, that Judas was going to betray him. He knew it when he picked up the towel. He knew it when he knelt down, and he washed his feet anyway. And now we haven't moved. We are still sitting there at that same table, still that same night, and Jesus is about to say out loud what he has known the entire time. Because someone sitting at that table, someone who has been eating with them, Judas, walking with them, doing life with them, is about to hand him over. And what I want you to notice before we even read a single word into this, Jesus is not panicking. He is not scrambling, and he is not out of control. He knows exactly what is coming, and it's not good, and he is choosing to speak it, not to cause chaos, because he loves the people in the room enough to prepare them for what's ahead. So let's go ahead and get into it today. I am going to be reading from my CSB Bible, but if you have a different version, it's totally okay. I personally just find the CSB Bible to be easier to read, but it still gives a more accurate word-for-word translation to the original language of the Bible. I also find it to be a really great translation for studying the Bible. So again, if you have a different version, it may just sound a little different, but the meaning is still going to be the same. Today, our first verses that we're going to be reading are going to be verses 18 through 22. And I'm just going to step back a minute because I'm going to read, and again, we're in John 13. I don't know if I even mentioned that yet. But I'm just going to step back a minute and read the two verses ahead of this because I feel like we ended the last section the last episode in a weird part of the section. So just to kind of get the flow going again, I'm sorry, I keep needing breaks. I'm going to read 16 through 17 first, and then I'll move into verses 18 through 22. So 16 and 17 say, "Truly I tell you, a servant is not greater than his master, and a messenger is not greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them." So now I'll go ahead and read today's verses, which is 18 through 22 to start. It says, "I'm not speaking about all of you. I know those who I've chosen, but the scripture must be fulfilled. The one who eats my bread has raised his heel against me. I'm telling you now before it happens, so that when it does happen, you'll believe that I am he. Truly I tell you, whoever receives anyone I send receives me, and the one who receives me receives him who sent me." When Jesus had said this, he was troubled in his spirit and testified, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." The disciples started looking at one another, uncertain which one he was speaking about. Okay, so Jesus opens this whole thing up by saying, "I'm not speaking about all of you." He's basically drawing a line here. Not everyone in this room is on the same page. Not everyone is moving in the same direction. And then he says, "I know those I have chosen." And I want to stop here for a second because this could easily feel like something went wrong. Like, did Jesus just accidentally pick the wrong guy, or did he make a mistake when he put this group together? And the answer is no. Jesus is not up here scrambling. He is not sitting at this table thinking, "Well, I did not see that coming." He knew. He always knew. He even references something written in the Old Testament about someone close turning against the person they shared a meal with. And if you want the reference, it's in Psalm 41. And it actually says, if I turn to that, it's Psalm 41, verse 9. It says, even my friend in whom I trusted, one who ate my bread, has raised his heel against me. And he's saying this was already written. This was already known. Nothing about tonight is catching God off guard. And then he says, I'm telling you this now before it happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe. Okay, so think about that for a second. He's not bringing up the betrayal to freak everyone out. He's not naming it so that they would confront Judas in the parking lot after dinner. He's telling them ahead of time because he loves them, because he knows what is coming, and he wants them to be anchored when it hits. So that when everything falls apart that night, and it really does fall apart, they will remember that Jesus told them, that he saw it, that he was never out of control. That is not a small thing whatsoever. Because how many times in your own life has something hit you and your first thought was like, where is God in this? Did he miss this? Why would he give this to me? Is this just chaos? And this moment is Jesus saying, I don't miss things. I see what's coming, and I will tell you what I can do to prepare you because I love you. And then John adds this one line that honestly just pulls me back every time I read it. He says, Jesus was troubled in his spirit. Troubled, deeply unsettled, heavy. And I just want to sit there for a second as well, because I think a lot of us, especially people that are newer in faith or that have been told so many different things or certain structures growing up in a religion, have like I think we have this picture of Jesus as someone who kind of like floated through life untouched. Like he was too holy to really feel the hard stuff the way we do. But that is just not who he is. He felt this. He sat with the weight of it. He let it be hard. And he did not give up and leave. He did not shut down. He did not pull away from the people around him. He stayed. And I think that is incredibly important for anyone who's ever been told that having faith means you should just feel better or have your stuff together, that you should just pray more and the heaviness will lift. That if you really trust God, you would not feel so anxious or so sad or so overwhelmed. Because Jesus, who trusted the Father completely, was sitting at a table troubled in his spirit. Faith does not mean you stop feeling things. It means you feel them and you stay anyway. And I want to make that perfectly clear to you guys. But that actually brings us to our first reflection question. It says, do you ever feel like something hard means you are doing faith wrong? And how does Jesus being troubled in his spirit change the way you see that? Like you have this quiet belief that if you were really close to God, you would just be more okay with that than where you are right now. Because I think a lot of us carry that, especially the ones, like I said, that are newer to this, or the ones that grew up around this version of Christianity that felt like you always had to have it together and smile and say the right things at the right times. And Jesus just kind of completely blows that up right there. You can be a mess. You can be heavy. You can be exhausted and unsure and troubled and still be someone God is right there with. That is not failure. That is just being human. And Jesus knows exactly what that feels like. I am praying that you guys can hear me because my voice is getting worse. But I'm going to use the last part of it just to get through this episode so I can record this for you guys. So we're going to move into the next section. We're going to be reading verses 23 through 27. I'm probably going to read 22 through 27 just because it kind of goes with the whole thing. I know we read 22 in the last one, which I probably should have split up differently. But that says, starting at 22, the disciples started looking at one another, uncertain which one he was speaking about. One of his disciples, the one Jesus loved, was reclining close beside Jesus. Simon Peter motioned to him to find out who it was he was talking about. So he leaned back against Jesus and asked him, Lord, who is it? Jesus replied, He's the one I give the piece of bread to after I've dipped it. When he had dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas, Simon Iscariot's son. After Judas ate the piece of bread, Satan entered him. So Jesus told him, "What are you doing? What you're doing, do quickly." So, we meet someone John describes as the disciple Jesus loved, and we've heard this in the past in John. But just really quick, a really quick thing right here. John is actually the one who wrote this whole gospel. He is this whole account of Jesus's life. He wrote this. And when he says the disciple Jesus loved, he is talking about himself here. And throughout this whole gospel, he refers to himself in this kind of indirect way, instead of just saying his own name. And which honestly, I kind of think is a little sweet. Like, he's not trying to make himself the main character in this gospel. He's just there, close to Jesus, paying attention. And Peter, Peter is one of Jesus's closest disciples, and honestly, one of my favorite people in the entire Bible, because he is just so human and so relatable. He is always either saying exactly the right thing at the right time, or completely putting his foot in his mouth, and there is truly no in between with him. So Peter motions over to John like, "Hey, ask him who it is he's talking about." Because the whole room is unsettled now. The vibe has completely shifted. Everyone is kind of looking at each other like, okay, what is actually happening right now? And when I picture this moment, when I first read this, I picture like the game of Clue brought to life. Like Miss Peacock just dropped her guess of lead pipe and conservatory, and all the characters are sitting there like waiting to find out who she thinks actually did it. Because we know the weapon, we know the room, so who is she going to assume? Except this is not a board game, this is real, and the tension in that room must have been absolutely suffocating. So John leans in close to Jesus and asks quietly, "Lord, who is it?" And Jesus tells him, he says, "It's the one I give this piece of bread to after I dip it." And he dips the bread and he gives it to Judas. Now, here's something that I did not know before I started studying this passage, and I learned it as I was studying it. It honestly kind of stopped me in my tracks a little bit, because in that culture, at a Jewish dinner table, and if I'm wrong about this, please leave a comment on this, but this is from the research I've done. This is what I found. At a Jewish dinner table, the host dipping a piece of bread and handing it to someone was actually a sign of honor. Like, you would do that for a guest you wanted to show special care to. So Jesus, in this moment, knowing full well that Judas is about to walk out that door and hand him over, still offers him something kind. I don't fully understand that. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I do. And I know a lot of us are probably the same way. But it is so difficult to be kind to someone that I know is going to backstab me. And I'm sure that's the same for most of us. But it does tell us something about Jesus that I think is really important for all of us to hear. His love doesn't change based on what someone does with it. It doesn't run out. It doesn't turn into something cold and ugly when it gets rejected. It just stays love. And I think for a lot of us, this is actually really hard to receive, because for a lot of us, life has taught us that love is conditional, that people get tired of you eventually, that if someone really knew everything about you, they would leave. And Jesus is sitting here at this table showing us something completely different. Then John tells us after Judas took the bread, Satan entered him. And I want to pause on that word for a second, because I think we have kind of this weird relationship with words like Satan and the devil. They either feel super dramatic, scary, like we shouldn't talk about them, or they feel like something out of a Halloween movie. And I think because of that, we sometimes just gloss right over it when we see it in the Bible. But it is right here in Scripture, and it is worth taking seriously because it's mentioned on purpose. The Bible describes Satan as a real spiritual being who works against God and against people. He is not equal to God, not even close. This is not some even matchup here. But the Bible takes him seriously, and so I think we should take him seriously as well. And what John is describing here is not that Satan just randomly showed up and hijacked Judas against his will and just we're looking at The Exorcist all over again. Judas has been making choices, small ones, over a long period of time. Doors he kept opening, things he kept saying yes to, things he would steal, a slow drift away from the light. And this was the moment he had drifted so far that there was nothing left holding him back. And I think about that a lot, honestly, because none of us just suddenly become someone we don't recognize overnight. It's the small, like the little small stuff, the slow drifts, the thing you keep going back to that you know is not good for you, the habit you keep saying you will deal with later, the relationship that keeps taking you somewhere you promised yourself you would not go again. Nobody falls all at once. And then Jesus looks at Judas and says, "What you're doing, do it quickly." And the rest of the disciples genuinely had no idea what he meant. Some of them thought he was sending Judas on a grocery run. Some thought he was telling him to give more money to the people in need. Because Judas was the only one who handled the money for the group. He was trusted. He seemed completely normal. He looked like everyone else at the table. And I think that is the part that sits with me the most, honestly, in this. Because the thing that is quietly pulling us away from God doesn't look dramatic at all. It doesn't look like some big villain moment that happens in our life. It looks just like a normal Tuesday. And nobody around you will even notice. Because you still show up, you still look fine, you still look like you belong. But you know, and God knows. And the good news is he's not standing over you, waiting to catch you doing something wrong. He's standing right there to help you turn around. So for our next reflection question, is there something in your life right now that you have been slowly giving more and more of yourself to, and somewhere in the back of your mind you already know it? Sorry, let me start that over. Is there something in your life right now that you have been slowly giving more and more of yourself to, and somewhere in the back of your mind you already know it is pulling you in the wrong direction? This is not to make you feel guilty at all. Genuinely not that. But honestly, what direction are you moving in right now? Because I feel like a lot of us can answer this question, whether we are still fully in faith or not. Because here's what I think is really important to hold on to from Judas's story. Up until this moment, he could have turned around. And so can you. It is never too late to change direction. That is not just something encouraging for me to say. That is literally the whole story of what Jesus is about. Last section, verses 28 through 30. It is short, but I promise you it does land heavy. So I'm going to go ahead and read that now. It's verses again 28 through 30. It says, "None of those reclining at the table knew why he said this to him. Since Judas kept the money bag, some thought that Jesus was telling him, but buy what we need for the festival, or that he should give something to the poor. After receiving the piece of bread, he immediately left, and it was night." And I know we kind of touched on this in the last section, already. I kind of got ahead of myself there. But when John closes this whole scene with one sentence that I genuinely think is one of the saddest lines in the entire Bible. So after receiving the piece of bread, he immediately left, and it was night. He just got up and left. And John makes sure we know that it was night. And I want to explain something about the way John writes, because it makes this moment so much heavier when we understand it. From the very first page of this gospel, and I think there's a reason that this is here, John uses light and darkness as this repeating theme that runs through this whole thing. It's not just some pretty writing. It means something every single time he uses it. If you've ever heard someone describe Jesus as a light of the world, that comes from John. He opens the whole book by saying the light came into the darkness, and the darkness could not overcome it. So when Judas walks out that door and John tells us it was night, he's not just telling us what time it was. He is telling us that Judas walked away from the only light in the room and stepped into the dark. I mean, Satan just entered him. And this is devastating to me, honestly, not because Jesus failed him, Not because love was never offered, not because Judas never had a chance. He had a chance every single time. He was there for the miracles. He heard the teaching. He watched Jesus get down on his knees and wash feet just hours before this, probably including his own. And he still got up and he still walked out into the night. And I don't say that to be harsh about Judas, because I really don't. But I think if we're being honest, most of us have had a moment where we're standing at a door and we have a choice about which direction to walk. Maybe you're in one of those moments right now. And this passage just makes it so clear what walking away from the light actually looks like. It is not always dramatic. It does not always feel like a big decision. Sometimes it just looks like quietly getting up from a table and slipping out the door. And the room is so busy and so tense that nobody even knows you left. Which is basically our last reflection question here. Is there an area of your life where you've been quietly slipping towards the door, a little more distant, a little more numbness, and what would it look like to just pull your chair back to the table? Not in some big dramatic way, just slowly. A little more distance every week, a little less time with God, a little more of that thing you keep telling yourself you'll deal with later, or a little more numbness towards the things that used to matter to you. And I just want to say, I'm not asking this to make you feel bad. Again, I know there's some pretty hard moments in this episode, but I'm asking it because I have been there, and I think a lot of us have, and I think a lot of us will. And here is what I love about this passage. And what I want to hold on to before we get into the final landing is the disciples who stayed at that table. Jesus turned to them and kept going. And he still had so much to say, so much to pour out. The next several chapters of John are just Jesus giving everything he has to people who stayed in that room with him. There is so much still waiting for the ones who stay. And if you've been drifting, if you've been quietly inching towards the door, it is not too late to just pull your chair back up to the table. He is still there. He is still talking, and he has not run out of things to give you. So here's where I keep landing after sitting with this passage all week. Jesus knew every single thing that was about to happen. The betrayal, the arrest, the cross, all of it. And he did not harden. He did not emotionally check out. He did not stop showing up for the people sitting right in front of him. He felt the weight of it, genuinely, deeply felt it, and he stayed at the table anyway. And after Judas walked out, after the single heaviest moment in that room, and I know I mentioned this in the last part, and I know we haven't seen this part yet because this is next week. I just kind of touched on it, which I don't really like doing, but Jesus just turns to the ones who are still in that room and just keeps going. He still had so much love to give. And I think that is the thing that I want you to walk away with today. Because I know that some of you listening right now are exhausted. You are working your long hours and coming home and trying to hold everything together. And if you have kids, that's a whole nother situation. And God has kind of just been on the back burner for a while. Not because you stopped caring, but just because life is a lot. And some of you are newer to this whole faith thing, and you are still trying to figure out what it even looks like for you in your real actual life. And some days it feels like you are still trying to figure it out. And some days it feels like you have no idea what you're doing. And some of you are carrying something heavy right now that nobody around you even knows about. A drift, a habit, a door you have been opening a little more each week. And I just want to say, Jesus is not sitting up there waiting for you to get it together before he will talk to you. He is not keeping score. He is not exhausted by you. He is not one mistake away from giving up on you. He is right there at your table, turning towards you. Turn towards you. You do not have to have the right words. You do not have to understand theology. You don't have to have the perfect quiet time every morning, or know how to pray out loud, or show up to church every Sunday. You just have to stay. That is it. Just stay. If today's episode meant something to you, if something in here hit different, or if it stirred something honest with you, or just made you feel a little less alone in whatever you're walking through right now, and you know that somebody else is going through that as well, would you just share it with that someone who might need that too? It does not have to be a big thing. Just send it to one person you might think what might need it. That is genuinely how this little community keeps growing, and it means more to me than I can even put in words. Um, I'm glad that my voice stuck around a little longer, or up until the end of this episode. I'm hoping that you guys can understand this and I don't have to delete this whole episode. But if you are brand new here, hi, welcome. I'm so glad you found this little corner of the internet. You are so welcome here, and I hope you stick around. If there's anything that you think that needs improvement on, or you didn't understand, or you would like to hear more of, please send me a message. I know I talked to somebody that sent me a message recently about possibly bringing up her question that she had on one of the episodes. Like, I know what we used to do, the Between the Verses episodes, doing another one of those, but just like kind of a listener question thing and kind of going over it on my part, what I got from it, not fully the answer, but just kind of what I got from it. And then seeing if you guys want to go in the comments and kind of discuss what you guys think. So there are different avenues that I've been thinking about going, but anyways, if you're new or if you're not new, come find us on Instagram at the Even If Project. There is, again, a link in my bio that takes you to a Google Sheet or a Google Doc, where I keep all the reflection questions updated every single week. That is where I keep this conversation going between episodes. So come hang out with us over there. Introduce yourself. I would love to know that you are there. Again, I've said this all the time, but I suck at social media, so I'm hoping that I get better at it eventually. But if you want to read ahead, next time we are going to be reading John 13. 13? We just read 13. Yeah, John 13. I thought we were done with it for some reason. Like I said, this cold has been taking over my entire brain. John 13, 31 through 38. It's the last part of John 13. It's a short little passage. That is where Jesus begins one of the most intimate conversations he ever has with his disciples, and where Peter, sweet, bold, completely unpredictable Peter, makes a promise that his heart absolutely means, but that he's just not ready to keep yet. You're not going to want to miss it, so bring your coffee, bring your Bible, and bring an open heart, and I'll meet you guys right back here next week. I love you all so much.